I previously made a video about the claim that the odd-numbered Star Trek movies are the worst and the even-numbered ones are the best. In that video, I looked at the odd-numbered films and determined that some of them were good and some were not. For this video, I'll be looking at the other side of the argument, whether the even-numbered movies are better than the odd numbers. These include The Wrath of Khan, The Voyage Home, The Undiscovered Country, First Contact, Nemesis, Into Darkness, and Section 31. First is Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan. As much as I love the first film, I will say that this one is certainly an improvement in terms of plot and action. I will nitpick that there are certain inconsistencies with canon, such as Khan saying he and his crew were marooned 15 years ago when it was longer than that, and the fact that Khan and Chekhov never met, at least on screen, before the events of the film. Personally, I wasn't really into the whole thing with Kirk having a secret son, but it had its role in the narrative. So did Spock's death, which was thankfully left open-ended and resolved in the following film. I've heard people complain that The Wrath of Khan feels too much like an action movie and not enough like a Star Trek movie, but it was only the second Star Trek movie ever made, and they were simply trying something new. I liked the symbolism towards the end of Kirk picking up his reading glasses only to find that one lens was broken, probably meant to represent how he and Spock were two halves of the same whole, and now Spock was gone. All of the actors in this movie gave fantastic performances, and the visual effects were impressive even for the time. The music was pretty great too. The sentiment that the even-numbered movies are the best does hold up with this one. Then we come to Star Trek IV: The Voyage Home, aka the one with the whales. There are so many positive aspects of this movie, one being Leonard Nimoy's writing and direction. He seemed to understand that after the previous two films were very serious, this one could use some levity and lightheartedness, on which it delivered. It also does well as a continuation of the events of those films, giving the audience a chance to see Spock regain his memory and come into himself again, as the other characters witness it too. It's kinda hard to describe what exactly makes this movie so good, because everything is a completely valid answer. For one thing, even though Star Trek is about exploring space, it's nice when the story can come back to Earth every once in a while. I like the philosophical aspect of considering other life forms besides humans being intelligent and significant even to extraterrestrial life, as well as the conservationist message. This movie is also a good way to demonstrate that you can have a deep, meaningful story that also has plenty of comedy throughout. The only way I think it could have been any better is if they'd found a way for Saavik to have a role in the crew going back in time. Maybe she could have been paired up with Sulu to even things out. Next is Star Trek VI: The Undiscovered Country. Although I don't agree that The Final Frontier is the worst Star Trek movie, I can definitely see how the producers didn't want it to be the last one, at least for these characters. In my opinion, The Undiscovered Country is every bit as good as The Voyage Home. It's cool that the story actually took from The Next Generation and allowed audiences to see the event of the Khitomer Accords being signed. I loved seeing Spock take command and lead the mission to rescue Kirk and McCoy, and Sulu commanding his own ship and helping out the Enterprise from there. Valeris being a traitor was a well-implemented surprise twist. One aspect of this movie that is often criticized is Spock's forced mind meld with Valeris, but it clearly pained him to have to do so it's not out of character. I'd call it an example of the needs of the many outweighing the needs of the few. The whole crew needed to know what she knew, even if the meld was painful for both her and Spock. It was nice seeing Kirk finding some closure over the death of his son. The ending of this movie was a satisfying send-off for the Enterprise crew, as they all happily reflect on their days in Starfleet while accepting that their time serving together on the Enterprise is coming to an end. After that is the first of the even-numbered The Next Generation movies, Star Trek: First Contact. Like The Undiscovered Country, this one is a much-needed improvement upon its immediate predecessor. Like the two previous even-numbered Star Trek movies, I think basically everything about this one was done right. I'm glad Worf was able to rejoin the Enterprise D crew for this adventure. I do think it was a bit odd that the Borg would have a queen when they're supposed to be a collective with no hierarchy, but her character was written and executed well. The situations that the characters get into and the decisions they end up making help them to learn more about themselves and each other, which is always satisfying to see. It was an apt writing choice to have the Vulcans be the first alien species to officially make contact with humans. After only hearing about the great feat of Zefram Cochrane inventing the warp drive, it was super cool to actually see it happen. And I'm sure the characters felt that way about it too. My only minor criticism is that it might have been a bit more interesting if Cochrane had conducted his warp test without knowing the future it would bring about. Following that is Star Trek Nemesis. Despite falling into the number group which supposedly has the best movies, this one was generally considered not to have met expectations and, along with the cancellation of Star Trek Enterprise, was regarded as bringing about the temporary end of the franchise. The main issue was probably the director not knowing anything about Star Trek. The movie does have redeeming qualities, though. I was glad to see Riker and Troy finally tie the knot, which felt like a long time coming. I also liked seeing Data get to meet another one of his android siblings that Dr. Soong created before him. Janeway's appearance was a nice little surprise. Data's death was sad, but the way it was carried out properly demonstrated his loyalty and altruism. I very much wish that the deleted scene in which Spot comes into the care of Worf had been included. My only major criticism is the scene where Troy is assaulted and Picard denying her leave afterward. I don't really have too much more to say about this one. It wasn't spectacular, but it wasn't by any means an irredeemably bad movie. I do think it demonstrated that it was time for these characters' story to come to a conclusion, though that could have been carried out better. Now we come to Star Trek Into Darkness, the 12th movie overall and second of the Kelvin Timeline trilogy. As I mentioned in the Odd Numbered Movies video, I was very much not impressed with Star Trek 2009, and so I didn't go into this movie with very high expectations. I admit that Zachary Quinto's Spock grew on me a bit with this movie, but not Chris Pine's Kirk. The story of this film was a bit more coherent than the previous one, but mainly because so much of it had been taken from The Wrath of Khan. There were still plenty of plot points that didn't make a lot of sense, such as using transporters to travel between star systems, and the criticisms of Khan being white and Carol Marcus being portrayed in a misogynistic way are warranted. Overall, I would say that this movie deviates from the trend of even-numbered Star Trek movies being the better ones. Finally, at least for now, we come up on Star Trek Section 31. I already made a whole video about how the reception of this movie was not a good look for the Star Trek franchise, but I didn't really say anything about the actual content of the movie. That's right, I watched this awful movie, so you don't have to. Feel free to thank me in the comments. The opening seems to be trying to make the audience have sympathy for Emperor Georgiou, but it doesn't work if you've seen Star Trek Discovery and know who this character is and all that she's done. I don't get why Mel was on one of the movie posters when she's only there for 10 minutes before dying. The movie could have been a way for us to learn more about Deltans, but I guess not. Rachel Garrett was most likely only there because the producers thought that a legacy character would draw in attention. The movie has major pacing issues, going directly from intense action to scenes where nothing happens and back again. All the characters are so one note, and I wasn't made to care about any of them by the end. All of the jokes were forced and none were funny. They also pulled the trope of having a character who was long presumed dead turn out to be alive only to show him dying for real. Generations, anyone? Point is, this is a very bad movie. If it had been a series instead, like originally planned, it would have been canceled after 1 or 2 seasons at most, and no one would care. All in all, I wouldn't say that all of the even-numbered Star Trek movies are better than all the odd ones, but most of them are good on their own, all except for 12 and 14. What do you think? Do you agree with the popular opinion that even-numbered Star Trek movies are the best ones? Let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching this video. I've got other Star Trek videos in the past and the future. Live long and prosper, and I'll see you next time.